What do you do when the journey you embark upon for self-discovery becomes a profound reawakening of the soul? Welcome to Life Jack, the Resilience Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rowe. Today, I'm honored to have Willie Handler, an extraordinary individual with a life that weaves a remarkable synthesis of resilience and fortitude. At 71, Willie is more than an accomplished hospital administrator, government policy expert, consultant, and the author of Out from the Shadows, Growing Up with Holocaust Survivor Parents. He is a devoted husband, father, and grandfather, and a writer who ventured into the deeply personal journey of memoir writing. What followed was a transformational expedition into understanding his roots, reassessing his relationships, and confronting his sense of purpose. Through setbacks, therapy, and a powerful support system, he emerged as a testament to the enduring spirit of resilience. Join me as we delve into Willie's inspirational narrative and explore the essence of resilience born from the heart of trauma.
Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Rowe, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were life-jacked.
Hi, Willie. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Well, Willie, to start, can you share with the listeners what inspired you to embark on writing your memoir after a successful career in various fields? Because you could have written about many, many things, but you decided to be vulnerable and write about your life.
Yes. I'm an author of 3 other books. They're fiction books. In fact, they're humor. So going into something like memoir writing was quite a jump in genre. The interesting thing is I never really wanted to write this book. I never planned on writing it. My wife insisted, you should write your family story. And I'm going, there's so many Holocaust books out there. Nobody wants to read another one. And besides, I didn't even really know much because my parents really didn't speak too much about their experiences. And I remember the first time I actually wrote something about my parents' story, it was only an 1,800-word blog post. That's all I could remember, or that's all I knew. And so I started doing research, and the more research I did, the more I sort of got drawn in, fell into this big, huge rabbit hole, and just said, okay, I'm going to do it. And that's really sort of the genesis.
Although, yes, there are many Holocaust books out there, and there are many Holocaust museums around the United States and other countries as well, because it was such a traumatic event for a group of people. But Willie, I appreciate that you wrote this book because we have to know more stories out there besides the Diary of Anne Frank, right? We have to know more because I'm a firm believer of educating the people. And the more that we educate the people about past trauma and things that have happened in our world, the hope is that these things don't repeat themselves, right?
That's the goal. I don't know how effective it is.
True. I guess we have to continue to educate the masses out there, so that they will know that these things did happen and they're not just fictional stories, that they are stories that really happen to people in their lives. Now, the process of writing a memoir is not a typical one, right? Which you discussed that. You were a fiction writer and you jumped genre to write a memoir and then pen historical information. So can you describe how it kind of, you said it served as a transformational journey for you. So how so?
Well, I tackled this book like all my other books, and it was nothing like that because when I started to try and remember those stories from my past, because that's a critical part of a memoir, of course. And these stories, memories started coming out. So, all of it stored, buried trauma. I didn't even realize I was turning around just into the surface and just blew up on me. It was transport driven.
Now, oftentimes when people write memoirs, they say that as they're writing, there are memories that come up that they totally forgot about. So did you find that there were memories that you had forgotten about that just kind of presented themselves?
Oh, definitely. There was a period of time where I was not getting very much sleep because the anxiety was building up, and it was not unusual that at nighttime all of these memories started coming to the surface. And this was like an ongoing process for months and months. I would remember something, then I would go back and put it in an appropriate spot in my manuscript, and it kind of was at times almost piecemeal.
Nice. Now, in those memories, you've said before, and as I did research, I found out that it prompted you to re-examine your feelings towards your parents and relationships. So how did this introspection influence your priorities in life?
I was a fiction writer. I mean, that was my most recent career. And I've written 2 books over the course of 8 years or something like that, 7, 8 years. And I realized at one point, I don't even know if I could go back to writing this. And I decided that I was going to start using memoir, my family stories, and I could say the memoir is not a true memoir because it provides a historical perspective of my family and how they survived the war, my own upbringing, and I talk a lot about generational trauma. But I decided that I was going to use these stories and my life to educate people on the Holocaust. And that really has been the focus of my life. And I have sort of many that's on the go right now that are consistent with that direction.
Now, I understand that overcoming mental challenges was a key aspect of your journey. And just like you mentioned before, there was a lot of anxiety building up as you were writing this book. And so you decided to seek therapy. So how do you think that seeking therapy aided in your path to resilience?
One thing, I consider resilience and trauma to go hand in hand. That's, to survive a trauma, you need to have a certain amount of resilience. Can you build up your resilience? I'm not too sure about that. I know I've spoken to a lot of children of other Holocaust survivors who told me they couldn't envision surviving what their parents did. But until you're sort of faced with trauma, you really don't know how much resilience you have. And it's only going through that experience that it comes to the surface. However, getting back to that question, as I started sinking into what I would say is a mental health hole, and I just decided I needed to do something because when this book was going to be published, I'm going to have to be able to pull myself together and talk about it. And so I reached out and sought the help of a therapist. And so to a certain extent, that process built up some additional resilience.
As a child of Holocaust survivors, do you think that as you were being raised in the home with your parents, do you think that the trauma that they survived, do you think that it had any impact on you and basically how you lived your life?
Incredibly so, without even understanding it. And it's only now when I look back do I really, can I sort of not put the dots together and see what really happened to me. Most Holocaust survivors, when the war was over, they came out of the camps, out of the woods, out of hiding, with no support. There was no mental health services available to them, and they just kind of reestablished their lives from scratch often. And so as a child, you see these people, you're being raised by people who are struggling, that they have their own trauma to deal with, in many cases no idea how to manage it, and much of it is just passed on to you. And you just learn how to deal with it. I mean, as a child, my parents were, how I would call them, they were loving but distant. And so I was very much left on my own, not just, and I don't mean it sort of in a physical sense, but I had no help, with homework. If I had a problem at school, I had to deal with it myself. You want to play sports, well, you're going to have to enroll yourself and bring yourself and show up yourself. You don't get that kind of support. They're really, really focused on the very basic needs, which is food, shelter, and clothing, and providing that kind of emotional support wasn't necessarily there. So I grew up kind of in survival mode myself, and I became very distrustful of others. I built up this wall around me. People couldn't get close to me, and a whole slew of what I would say is other systems that developed over time.
Now, when a group of people go through a mass trauma event such as the Holocaust, like you mentioned, it develops, generational trauma develops, right? And so as they're going through their trauma and trying to heal from it, like you said, they pass it on to their children. And so that is essentially what you also write about in this book, Out from the Shadows. So what insights do you hope to bring through this book, Out from the Shadows?
Well, really the message I have, at least the message I think I'm providing is that it's just I guess it's kind of like twofold. One is that how destructive hate is, and that we need to learn to deal with each other without hate. But the other is that how everybody looks at, and they understand that Holocaust survivors are damaged people, so to speak. But what most people don't realize, don't even know, is there is this hidden community of descendants, children and grandchildren, and in some cases even great-grandchildren at this point, who are also sometimes just as damaged. And so it's sort of a wake-up call that these people exist. And not only that, many of these people have never even spoken about their experiences, which I think we're going to get into very soon.
Yes. Now, you credited a strong support system in aiding your journey. So can you kind of speak on the role that your wife, your friends, and your therapist kind of played for you in the times that were very...
The healing process, although you don't totally heal from trauma, it's always there. But during that process is not what I would call very linear. It's much more closer to a roller coaster, and with many highs and lows. And I really experienced that, and you need people around you to kind of anchor you so that the swings aren't as wild. And my wife was, my poor wife, I should say, was in the middle of this hellstorm that I was going through. And but I also had friends who reached out, and I was incredibly lucky because the first therapist I approached was, for me, the perfect therapist. And it took me a while to get accustomed to therapy. I quit several times because I accused her of making me worse, because you actually do get worse before you get better. But at the end of but in the end, and I actually still in therapy, all these different people in my life helped me work my way through this healing process, and to where I am now. I'm not where I used to be before, but because you can never go back. But I'm certainly a much better version of myself.
Reflecting on your experiences, how exactly would you define resilience?
For me, resilience is the ability to take on stresses in your life and to get past them, or barriers and things like that. And I think that people who have trauma naturally build resilience, and it's sort of it's like a survival. It's a survival tool that you develop to get through trauma, get through stresses in your life, and so it's your ability to sort of deflect and bounce back. And I saw it so much, not just my parents, but their friends and other family members who went through the same experience, how they were able to not just get through such a horrific experience, but to sort of bounce back and kind of lead as normal of a life as they could. Some of them were much more adept at it, and others less, but they kind of got through life. And to me, that's an incredible amount of resilience.
Do you think that your view of resilience has evolved over the years?
No, I really don't think I was really focused on this concept of resilience. And so it was only my own trauma that I started to understand what resilience really meant. Maybe my early perspective of resilience was basically as a bystander. Once you go through your own trauma, you have a very different and much more in-depth understanding of how resilience works.
What advice do you have for others who might be struggling with their own journeys of self-discovery or confronting the weight of generational trauma?
And I should, it's called The Hidden Victims. I think it's an apt title, on generational trauma of children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. I've interviewed 97 people for the book, and what I've discovered is how many people, so many people have not spoken about their own personal experiences, almost as if they were afraid to, and share what kind of trauma they've been experiencing. Some people I interviewed, they basically told me they were telling me their story for the first time. And so part of what my message, especially to those with generational trauma, is you need, is that despite your age, because a lot of these people are in their 60s and 70s, you can still heal and find a better place for yourself. But you need to open up. You need to talk to others, share your experiences with others. Don't be afraid to talk about it, especially men. And some had actually been to therapy. Others basically told me they would love to go to therapy, but they don't know who. So, so part of the reason I'm writing this book is for that community to help make them understand that they're not alone. Their experiences are not unique, and don't tell, you wouldn't believe how many people told me they thought their experience was very unique, and then I tell them, no, it's not. I've spoken to dozens of people who are just like you. So it's to go out there, and it's not too late to heal, develop that resilience, and lead a happier life.
Now that you have written your book and your memoir talking about your generational trauma, sometimes after people write their memoirs, they feel a sense that a burden has been released or lifted. Do you have that feeling?
Yes, definitely. So maybe not this past week. Past week was maybe a little rougher, but yeah, what drove me to therapy in the first place was the thought of people reading your memoir, or having to stand up in front of a group of people to talk about it. It's like we are now. Scared the hell out of me. And I would, when I showed up for therapy, first thing I said is, why are you here? And I said, because I had this book coming out and I'm terrified. And so, that I'm in a better place today that I can talk about it. I can talk about anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and its aftermath, and not being triggered. I'm very comfortable doing it.
No, that's wonderful. Now, lastly, Willie, in your opinion, what is the best way to build resilience in the face of adversity?
That's a tough one. I think maybe it's kind of a very individual thing as well. But I found that talking about my experiences have bolstered my resilience. One thing, talking about it with a friend, and some friends are very good to share with, and they kind of know the right things to say and what not to say, but they're never a substitute from a qualified and therapist who feel who you feel can relate to you and is and comfortable with. And I think that made a world of difference for me. And I encourage people that they're struggling and they need to build up resilience. That's a very good avenue.
Well, thank you, Willie, for sharing your inspiring journey with us today on LifeJack, the Resilience Podcast. Your story is a poignant reminder that even from the depths of trauma, we can rise with resilience and grace. To the listeners, may Willie's story encourage you to face your own challenges with courage and an open heart. So how can listeners find and connect with you or purchase your memoir, Out from the Shadows, Growing Up with Holocaust Survivor Parents?
Okay, now, if people want to connect with me, I do have a website, and it's very easy to find, williehandler.com. And I'm also on Substack, where I have a newsletter, and I write all kinds of articles, a lot of them related to trauma and resilience, and other issues as well, and that's on Substack. And I'm very active there. Usually, I will drop 2 to 3 blog posts a week. And if you're looking to read my memoir, it is quite inspirational but a tough read. Out of the Shadows is available. The easiest way to do it, to purchase it, is on Amazon, and you can. And best thing to do is probably just search by my name, Willie Handler.
Do you have any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
I think that that trauma and resilience are kind of like they're kind of opposite ends of a continuum, and I encourage people to find that inner strength and make a better life for themselves. And I hope that those who are struggling right now, if my story helps, I think that's wonderful.
Well, Willie, your insights on life, transformation, and healing inspire us all to look inward and embrace the power we have to overcome. I wish you and your family nothing but blessings and abundance. Thank you for being a guest. Please take care.
Thank you. Anyways, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I do hope the audience has gleaned something from this discussion.
Willie Handler, everyone. Be sure to go out and get your copy, or you can go to his website or online to purchase his memoir, Out from the Shadows, Growing Up with Holocaust Survivor Parents. Be sure to join me next time for more uplifting stories and insights on resilience. Until then, keep pushing forward, embrace the journey, and remember that every setback can lead to a greater comeback. Dr. Rowe, signing off.